I mean, what's incredible is the guy, someone in a white suit is almost certainly, a bourgeois, shall we say. And he's sort of standing with his hands behind his back, looking not particularly disturbed.
Paul Preston is the primary person writing about contemporary Spanish history in the English language. There's no doubt about that. So he has informed people's understanding not just of the Civil War, but of the background to the Civil War and what came after. And he's informed people to an extent that nobody else, I think, has been able to do.
This is people being taken away to be shot. And as you can see, there's lorries waiting to be loaded. But the extraordinary thing is that the people, the spectators. In European terms, it was an extremely savage and brutal war. There were certainly about 200,000 victims on the left and about 50,000 victims on the right. There were the most horrific crimes committed against women. And of course, none of this takes into account the people who died on forced marches of refugees. Immense numbers of people died in prison, in bombing raids and so on. And of course, that doesn't take into account those who died at the battlefront.
One of his most recent books, Spanish Holocaust, has been able to uncover how systematic the process of murder and imprisonment by Franco's regime has been, to a degree that we may have guessed, but it's been absolutely nailed down. There's names, there's dates, there's full explanations.
In the case of the Spanish Holocaust, where I was trying to find out what had happened all over Spain, and you think that there are 8,000 reasonably sized villages and small towns, obviously one couldn't do individual research in each and every one of those. Now, I used lots of archive material, but what I also did was create a network of local historians so we could interchange material and so on. And I think what I did was, I think it was the first time anyone had brought it all together in a readable form, because it is so complicated.
It wasn't just a fight against fascism. Within the Republican forces, if you wish, there was such diverse factions, from the anarchists, the communists, the socialists, the POUM, and all these versions, of course, totally muddled up.
Well, the big winner of the Spanish Civil War was Francisco Franco. He was able to establish a regime that lasted right until November 1975 with his death. So he was the big winner. The loser was, of course, Spain and anybody who was on the left.
When I first went to Spain in the late 60s, there were hardly any archives open. It was very, very difficult. So I was writing a thesis about the origins of the Civil War. The central inspiration behind all of what I was doing then, and indeed have done since, was the fact that you were pushing against this big lie. The idea that actually Franco was a gallant Christian gentleman, that he wasn't like Hitler and Mussolini, when in fact, if you'd done the work, you knew that he was.
Paul Preston wrote the biography of General Franco, and nothing has been written since then like that. It was a brainwash. The country was brainwashed. The propaganda was massive in television. The films were censored and were dubbed in order of manipulate the history, and everything was repressed. Then people started to forget. His book has opened minds. For example, my father then started to say, "Daughter, they lied to us a lot." Because he went to the war, according to him, to defend his mother and sisters from these savages, these rats that wanted to end religion and the Catholic Church. And then reading Paul Preston, he realized how manipulated they had been. Paul Preston's influence in Spain has been massive, not only for the historians and academics, but the general public. He appears in television anytime that something extraordinary happens in Spain, like the abdication of the king. Paul Preston immediately is asked about what has happened.
It's an alternative to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because looking at Spain's recent history and looking at the judicial the blocking of the judicial route to that in 2012, it's unlikely that such a thing is now at this distance going to happen in Spain. But in a sense, these books, and his book particularly, that story, that kind of that overview of everything, but told also with lots of human detail and stories, is, if you like, a testimony for people who never had one.
I think we're in the process of closing the civil war. I don't think we are yet there. The view of an outsider is particularly positive and particularly useful in the sense that he can approach the subject without preconceptions, without all the prejudice that normally mars the view of those who are more directly involved. Contributions like that of Professor Preston do help in that process, do help in that line.